What's up, guys? Good evening. How you all doing today?
Pretty good. Pretty good. How are you, Chalice?
I'm
I'm
doing great,
doing
Nick.
amazing.
That's good to hear, man. I've been really sitting back and thinking with all the extra time I'm having the quarantine, and it makes me wonder what's out there. I've been going back and watching old movies. What happened in a galaxy far, far away a long time ago, and it made me wonder about the real life situation of it. Is there other intelligent life out there? Is there other life out there at all? It's a question that we all wonder at some point or another, and there's really no firm answers. But it turns out that it's more than just science fiction writers who have written about this. In fact, many prominent philosophers, astrophysicists, and people, even economists, have written about this topic. Now, we're going to tackle the question today of, is there other life out there? Was there other life out there? Will there ever be other life out there? And which is scarier, for us to be the only intelligent life to ever exist in the universe, or the idea that there's someone else lurking around the corner? Now, to answer this question, we have to answer a lot of other questions, like what is life? What is intelligent life? Why is it out there? What is out there? Is it possible that it's out there? And then we have to answer the philosophical questions of, if it's out there, do we want to meet it? Do we want to hide from it? And I'm not quite sure what the scarier part is. If we're all alone in this universe, or if there's something else out there waiting to meet us. Before you answer these bigger questions, I'm going to throw it over to our resident biologist, Matt, to ask the simple question of, what is life and what was the genesis of life on this planet? Matt.
Well, thank you, Mikey. Life itself is a huge topic. I mean, it can stem through a lot of different smaller viewpoints, but when it comes to just like the genesis of life, um, from the most recent research and data we've been able to collect, is we think life originated here on Earth around 4.28 billion years ago. And these were called like hydrophilic vents on the surface of the ocean. And these are obviously microorganisms. And from these, they started to pretty much self-divide, which is called mitosis. It's similar to that. And as they started to mitose, gene markers in their DNA started to make errors in this mitosis, which then led off to creating similar to like sexual reproduction. And that kind of started to make more diversity in these microorganisms, which then led to other types of animals being emerged from this sexual reproduction, more diversity and such. And as the years went on, animals from the sea went to the land around maybe 2 billion years ago, and then so on. So this is kind of what the genesis of life looks like as of right now. Obviously, there's a lot more to be answered, and yeah, that's pretty much the genesis of life.
All right, so as of now, I have a quick question for you. As of now, have we been able to recreate life, or I guess the genesis of life, in a laboratory? So that is to say, have we been able to take molecules and non-living things and somehow put them in an environment that creates life as we know it?
That's actually a really interesting question, and the answer is yes. I'm not very familiar with the type, like the specific study, but this actually was able to happen in a jar. I'm also not familiar with how long it took, but they were able to make, um, I believe, amino acids in a concoction of um, minerals or whatever, and from that they were able to pretty much deduce that life would be able to form if they allowed this jar to sit there for however long it would take.
All right, so let's get down to it. You say for however long it would take. Let's just be clear. We're not talking about letting mold form for 20 days or a week or a couple months. We're talking millions of years, correct?
Yeah, it looks that way.
Okay. So if we're talking millions of years for life, even in its simplest forms, to really be created, isn't it possible that there are aliens all across the universe, but none of them are in our time period?
I mean, yeah, that could be very possible. With the amount of galaxies and stars, it is statistically it should be true. There is estimated around 200 billion to 2 trillion galaxies in our observable universe, which isn't the actual entire universe itself. And from those, there's 10 to the 22 suns or stars throughout all those galaxies. And since they estimate that a tenth of those stars have a planet like Earth, you would think then there has to be life out there other than our life on this planet.
Right. So you think you sit in the squarely in the there is other life out there, we just haven't seen it yet camp.
Yes.
Now, there's a stark distinction between other life, other intelligent life, and then other intergalactic life. Could you talk about what an intergalactic life might look like?
Do you mean like an intergalactic society or like
A society
civilization?
with the ability to actually travel to us, as opposed to just another set of humans, sitting on their planet lonely because there's nothing else out there for them to interact with.
Gotcha. So this type of civilization would be I believe, a category 4 or 5 on the Kardashev scale, which pretty much just is a scale based on advanced civilizations. So right now we're estimated our civilization is close to a 1, which is just getting over pretty much controlling all life on Earth, which is like saying weather, all the, like weather patterns, being able to travel to other planets in our solar system, that type of stuff. So a category 4 civilization would pretty much be able to travel throughout the whole galaxy. And this is either through different types of means. So such as they have pretty much broken Einstein's speed limit, which is being able to travel close to or breaking the speed of light, which if that isn't the case, would take a very long time to travel. So then they either find other means. So a hypothetical way of traveling throughout space, as in far distances, either having your consciousness put on digitally. So say like a flash drive or whatever, and that information can then be sent through a photon or a laser across the galaxy. And this can be seen in the show Altered Carbon and other science fiction movies or TV shows. So this is very advanced civilizations, and this would take a very long time to do. So these types of civilizations would have to start close to the beginning of the universe itself.
All right. So, I mean, I really think that we're asking three different questions here. We're asking, there's so many different questions to ask, really. I'd be interested to see what you think, Nick. Nick, are you in the camp of that there is other life in the universe, or do you believe that we're alone?
Well, it's a good question, Charles. I just, kind of what Matt was saying, there's just so many different planets out there and many different galaxies that in my opinion, there has to be some sort of, either, microbiological life, or there might be some, multicellular, if there is intelligent life, like similar to humans or more advanced. I think there's a lot of questions out there that say like maybe why we haven't even met them yet. But if you think about it, like where the Earth sits compared to its sun, like in the kind of like what scientists call it, like the Goldilocks range, where there's enough warmth and heat to produce a certain amount of gases and also still hold water on the planet. Like, for example, Mars used to be in the Goldilocks zone or close to it. And so that's why we've done a lot of research over the years on, is there life on Mars? We see polar ice caps on Mars. So that could, that's water is an essential part to life. So, but, we see a lot of planets out in the universe that could potentially be in that Goldilocks zone or might have some sort of plant life on it, which could mean that there would be some sort of other sorts of life on that planet. So that's kind of where I'm sitting right now. I'd be curious to hear maybe your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so easy to argue for any of the points. I think one of the fundamental problems we have when discussing this topic is a problem that people have when discussing many things. It's the idea that it's impossible to prove that something doesn't exist. We can't prove that there is not an invisible blank in this room right now. It's hard to prove that there aren't aliens. How would you even go about proving there aren't aliens? So I think that the first step we have to do is just kind of assume if there are aliens, how would they communicate with us? And then we have to kind of go based off the assumptions that, assuming there's other life in the universe, then what would it look like? And when I ask that question, again, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm inclined to believe there has to be some form of life. I think it's almost the height of hubris to imagine that we're the only intelligent life, we're the only life to ever have existed in the universe.
Yeah, I think, as scientists have tried to, contact other sorts of life or look for certain gases, I know the biggest thing was looking for planets that have O2 emissions or nitrogen or some of these gases that aren't typical in a planet's atmosphere and that are signs of biodiversity on a planet. And so I know, obviously, Earth, we just look at planets that might have a similar atmosphere to Earth, and that's worked out. We've actually found many different culprits, but going back to what Matt said, scientists have only really been able to discover a very, very minuscule amount of planets and galaxies out there that are out of the whole universe. So I remember hearing one quote is that, if the universe was like all the oceans on Earth, that we've only discovered maybe a cup of water of every certain stellar formation out there.
Wow.
So there's a lot that will continue to grow on and build, as humans. And I think that there could be a potential that we do come across a discovery in the near future. There's also something really interesting is actually this year, obviously the virus might have delayed some things, but there's supposed to be a Mars mission this year determining kind of taking the experience they did back in the 1970s, and we're gonna do them again now, but with a different twist, as in we're gonna start looking for we're gonna start testing and using different technology that we've developed over the years to possibly find better signs.
So just to be clear, you're saying that they're going to look at Mars to see if there's signs of life ever existing on it?
Yeah, because the test in the 1970s, from what I was reading, some came back positive for life and some came back negative. So there was kind of a ambiguous result on Mars, and so I think what they're going to go back, and they're in the process of building a new rover and a new test machine that could be taking, could be conducting different tests with different molecules, different software, to potentially rule out or even bring Mars into the light of potentially having life in the past. Because what they did in the 1970s is they were looking for life as we know it on Earth, but there's micro life that's close to the bottom of the sea in extreme conditions. There's some, like Matt said, close to volcanic vents near the magma layer within our Earth. So there's life that could be formed in extreme conditions, and that's what they're going to look for on Mars.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm of the school of thought that there actually might have been. I think it's more likely than not that there was life on Mars, just from what the minimal reading I've done on it. But let me ask you guys a question from like more of a pragmatic point of view. So what? Convince me to be intrigued. What does it matter if there's life on Mars or if there's life anywhere if we're never going to really interact with it in any substantial way?
Yeah, I think I'd definitely like to spin this question back on you two. It's very, very important question. But I think as maybe a development of our civilization and our society, we're all intellectually curious. We want to know an answer, and we want to be able to grow. So I think deciding whether there was, other life will help not only our growth and our studies of this very complex subject, but I think it could support future technological gains. And all, if we do somehow move to another planet, we could potentially have, culprits for this expansion. But I'd definitely be up to hear what you guys think.
So I also think it's a very interesting question as well, based only because if we're able to find life on other planets, we then are able to see that extraterrestrial life maybe might be like plentiful, and that will enable us to gauge about what we do in the future, such as what is the chance that we're able to go to galactic expansion, as in, are we going to become a civilization that is able to colonize our solar system, our galaxy, maybe even farther. And if we find that there was a lot of life in the past, but they never got to a certain type of point, or there isn't any life at all, that does pose a question of what is going wrong or what has happened to make us almost a miracle, or are we getting to a point where we get to this large hurdle that we can't go past? And this is a more philosophical topic, but I kind of want to ask this to you guys. It's the topic of the great filter, which is pretty much saying that throughout any type of life, microorganisms to multicellular life to complex systems such as ourselves, there's hurdles all of these organisms have to go through to reach the next level. And the great filter pretty much asks, is there a specific type of hurdle, say solar expansion or galactic expansion, to where that type of species becomes extinct and can no longer gain growth? So what are you guys' opinions on the topic, or do you have a specific opinion based on where do you think we're going to be going towards the future as our just our civilization in general?
Charles, you want to start off?
I didn't want to say anything because I'm by far probably the most pessimistic of the three of us in this podcast. To be completely honest with you, I honestly don't think we're going to ever get off of Earth, because I think we're going to blow it up before we get close to it. Like, I'm sorry, but I just look at climate change, and I look at the way that we interact with each other, and I just don't think it's really possible for us to overcome our own petty squabbles, interspecies squabbles, to actually band together and make it past our own solar system. Well, I mean, that's not a very interesting answer because it's very depressing.
Yeah, but I think, going off, kind of the question that Matt posed is that there's many different stages that life has to go through, kind of like, hurdles they have to jump and so forth. And I think that, we may be very fortunate and might be the only species that actually developed and evolved so far to the point where we can, think about our own thoughts, to the point where we have a higher intelligence level that we can start thinking about things like this. But there could potentially still be, some sort of single cell organism out there, as we've discovered on, like I mentioned before, in different parts of Earth. So that's kind of where I sit. But, Matt, what are your thoughts on that?
I think Mikey's thoughts are completely valid. I mean, the trajectories for climate change right now pretty much leaves our civilization in question around 2050, 2100. So, I mean, I think this is a bump in the road, so to speak, right now. If we're able to get past it, it's cruise sailing, I think. But if not, then we're going to crash the car we're in, and we're pretty much just going to go downhill from there. Going back to your point, though, Nick, about archaea and cells that live in extreme conditions, I think that's a great sign for extraterrestrial life. I think in terms of thinking of aliens stereotypically, we, just as humans in general, we look at our own biology, say carbon-based systems, and the things that we have seen throughout life. But I kind of want to give you this question to you. What if we're looking at more biased question, as in we're looking for extraterrestrial life that shows the same biomarkers as us? But what if extraterrestrial life is made up of different types of molecules, such as silicon is very similar to carbon. So what if they're a silicon-based life form out there and stuff like that? A really interesting fact before we go into this discussion is that there is two types of archaea I want to talk about. One is a type of archaea that lives in nuclear reactors, and they're able to get their energy from detoxifying radioactive mercury, which is super interesting. And then another one, they live in volcanoes, and they eat inorganic chemicals, such as examples of these are salt, cyanide, or ammonia. So it's very not intuitive types of means of living. So I mean, I think we should maybe be looking in that type of life.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I'm no scientist, so this is not my expertise, my field that I feel comfortable in. But I can say that, as we develop new technology, and I do think the reason why we're going back to Mars after 50 years is to do new experience with a different mindset. like you said, to look for different different portions of Mars that could be inhabited or could have been inhabited by life. So we're trying to look at space and exploration and signs of life in different light, and I think we've made serious progress on how we look at things like this. But maybe we just don't have the technology to detect a silicon-based life form. Like you said, we might think about it and understand that this is a possibility, but we're just not sure how to go about that. So we have a lot of things to improve on. But like Chalice said, there's a lot of roadblocks ahead of us that could keep us from getting there. So we have the goal in sight. We're not sure of the road to take. But I'm very curious from my end is, what do you guys think this life form would potentially look like? How would it act? And then maybe some of the reasons why we haven't discovered it yet, or why we haven't come across some intelligent life yet. That'd be my two big questions I want to throw on the table.
This is something I actually find incredibly interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, there's the bias, then the implicit bias there is going to have to obviously be, because we've only seen so much of the observable universe, and we've only seen so much of the observable universe from our perspective. So it's really difficult for us to truly, even imagine the vast number of different life forms that could hypothetically exist. But then at the same time, you have to balance that with the idea of what does it take for an intelligent life form to exist. For example, a lot of people argue that one of the exigence of human intelligence and us rising to the top of the food chain and kind of, superseding nature in many respects, was the fact that we started cooking our meat, and that allowed us the amount of calories to actually have extra energy to do different things. Well, then are we looking for a carnivore? Must it be a carnivorous? There's so many different ways that we could define, we're like this, so that must be what they look like. But then I look at it and, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's actually two types of sloth. There's a three-toed sloth and a two-toed sloth. And they're actually genetically incredibly different, meaning that the sloth fills such a niche in the ecosystem or ecology, I guess, of the world as it is right now, that two organisms evolved to fill that niche, completely unrelated to each other, or relatively unrelated to each other. So I think that there's actually extensive research that's been done into the different forms of evolution and how many times each different adaptation has evolved. For example, how many times echolocation has evolved, how many times eyesight has evolved, and so on. And I think doing a lot more research into that may give us some hints into what we're looking for in terms of intelligent life in other universes. My inclination will probably be that, I don't want to say bipedal, but I would have to imagine carnivorous to some degree, and I would have to imagine some form of, not vision necessarily, but some form of understanding and collecting data from the surroundings that is incredibly accurate, such as vision or possibly an advanced echolocation system. But aside from that, it's really hard to imagine what they would look like, because obviously, like, even the gravitational pull of the planet would significantly impact what these animals look like and how tall they are, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I just want to go off of what you're saying, Mikey, which are just great points. I completely agree with you.
Thank you.
Looking at Darwin's theory is a huge insight into what extraterrestrial life will look like. I just want to add some more markers to what they might look like. In our civilization, language is huge, up there with like what you said, cooking meat, giving us more calories. I would also argue that agriculture is also another reason, partially, but also just language. Being able to communicate with each other and stuff like that. So I think that is another or another thing that these extraterrestrial beings might have. And then another thing is just being able to make tools. So either like a opposable thumbs like we have, some type of thing that's able for them to grab onto and kind of make tools to help them either hunt or to do whatever they're trying to do. But yeah, great things what you're saying, Mikey.
I'm actually in my mind, I believe that there's actually going to be, if we do come across some sort of life, it's actually not going to be humanoid in any case. I think that, obviously what we've seen here on life is the evolution from like sort of like, very, very back into the start of Earth. Like you mentioned, Matt, around 4 billion years ago, we had, single celled and became multicellular. We actually had like the first jawless fish. Humans came from fish, and those fish gained lobed fins and such, and then those grew into amphibians, which became land-based. We had reptiles. So, tetrapods, like four-legged, four-armed, limbed life came from something similar, but, on a different planet, like Chalice said, under different circumstances, different gravitational pull, different food sources, we're going to see something different. Maybe they're six-legged, maybe they don't have no legs. There could be somewhat different. So I think the biggest thing out of this whole question is that we can only answer it with our experiences, right? We can only answer it with the vision that we have as humans and humanoid figures. And science fiction will tell you that they look just like us, but they're green and they carry lasers, right? Like that's kind of what you think of when you think of an alien, but they could actually be totally different, something that we never would have expected or even could understand. They could also be very basic, So I just think if I had to take a guess at that, I don't think they'd be humanoid at all. Unless they came from a planet that's almost exactly like Earth and would follow the same evolution patterns.
That's a great point, because if you think about the I'm sorry, Matt. Let me just say really quickly. If you think about the specifications of Earth as it is right now, they haven't always been exactly like they are. I mean, the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere has drastically decreased in the past couple million years. And we used to see animals that were what we'd call bugs today that were massive, because the way that bugs take in oxygen is through their skin. So as they increase their surface area to body mass or body volume ratio decreases. So they can't, there's a natural limitation on the size that they can be based on the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. So even if we had a planet that was similar to ours in every way except for the oxygenation levels, then we could see drastically different life forms forming just due to that one simple fact of there being slightly more or slightly less oxygen. And I mean, the same goes for anything. The size of the planet could mean that we have slug-like forms if the planet is so large that being above like a meter tall or half meter tall is just impossible due to the gravitational pull. So I mean, it's definitely, I think you have to describe the planet that life is on, and then we'd be able to make a much more accurate guess as to what it would look like.
Yeah, just to add on to you. So I kind of agree with both of you. I don't think extraterrestrial life would be kind of humanoid, but I do think that evolutionary theory spans across planets. So I like Darwin's theory of evolution. I think that would be present in any type of ecosystem on any type of planet that holds life. But like how that life looks definitely will be different to the type of parameters that are on that planet. But kind of just to close out this segment, I do want to kind of list what I think that life would have. You guys can agree with me or not, but like what Mikey said, a means of taking efficient calories, so either carnivorous, means of language, informational processing, so like vision, sonar, or like heightened earsight or whatever, or hearing, and then a means of tool making, so like opposable thumbs, tentacles, or whatever. So that's kind of the list. How does that sound with you guys?
I totally agree. I think there's some basic functions you need that to survive on any planet. I think you need to be able to see and locate a food source. So that's where I think all us can agree that there has to be some sort of location, some sort of connection with the brain to locate those kind of things. And I think efficient calorie intake, like you said, whether that be through meat or some sort of absorbing energy, that's gonna have to be needed. But I think, like you said, we can kind of know that whatever life we come across has gone through efficient evolution, right? Like the aspects of that life form or that evolutionary species the stuff that can't survive is going to be cut out, right? So natural selection, that's what I'm trying to get at. Like that's going to apply to almost any species that we come across, whether it be advanced or very basic. Lastly, I kind of wanted to maybe look at, why haven't we come across life yet? What barriers have come across, or maybe we have discovered life, we just don't know it yet. So let's go around the room here, the Zoom room, and figure out, what do we think? Chalice.
Oh, I mean, if you're just gonna think about it logically, before we're gonna say why we haven't seen life, let's list the possible reasons. One, there is no life in the universe. Two, it exists, but it was in a different time period. Three, it exists, but it's not intelligent enough, nor are we intelligent enough to find each other. Or four, it exists and is intelligent, but is for some reason hiding from us. I certainly think it's not, as we've already covered, the fact that no life exists other than us. And I also don't really think that it's that life is intelligent but is hiding from us. I know there's a lot of people who believe that theory, but I just don't think that there's life out there that's hiding. I think that like we were saying, a lot of the biological things that would be required of a civilization to be, or of a species for it to make a massive civilization such as ours. I think there's also a level of curiosity that would be required for it to have that. And I think that curiosity would make it impossible for them not to be searching out for other life and asking the same natural questions that we're asking right now. So I would say the reason we haven't seen life is either one, we're not in the right time period, or two, we're just too far away. And between those two, it's hard to say. I would say it's probably both. It's probably one, we're too far away and not intelligent enough in ourselves to find it. And then two, if we were around at a different time, there might have been other intelligent civilizations that had the ability to reach out to us. So it's not a great answer, but I think it's too vague to really, it's hard to really say for certain.
Yeah, I agree with you on both those points. A very similar argument to what you were saying, how like there is intelligent life out there, but they're hiding. So an alternative one is like there's an intelligent life out there, but it's like super intelligent, and they found us, but they're waiting for us to get to their like level of intelligence to be able to like communicate. So like an example would be if you have like a house infested of ants, are you going to try and talk to those ants to come out of your house, or are you just going to exterminate them or something? Like, because you can't communicate with them. And in this case, we are the ants, and the extraterrestrial other civilization is us. So I mean, like when you have that huge spectrum of intelligence where they're like so far away from us in advancement, I definitely think that they wouldn't waste their time with us. So I mean, that's just like, that's also philosophical, but it's definitely something to think about.
Mm-hmm. I could definitely spin that around and just say that maybe, I'm not sure how likely it is. I have no answer for that, but maybe we're the advanced civilization and this other life form is the ants. And as in they're still in the early evolutionary stages, and they will eventually maybe reach a species like, humans that can think for themselves and try to communicate with others, but maybe they haven't reached it yet. And so time will tell. Obviously we've tried to do all on our end, reach out through radio waves and satellites and use our, what we know about space and life to kind of try to locate these. But, like Matt said, they might be so advanced that a single radio waves might not even be, something that they use anymore or have come across. But I think there could be a potential that they have located us and maybe have realized that we provide no use to them, or we could be too far away. I think that the signals we've been sending out are still flying through space, and since the universe is so vast, maybe they just haven't got it yet. Because some signals that we receive at our space stations and stations on Earth, like it was like a star exploding 5 billion years ago or something crazy, and we're just receiving that signal now. But if you think about how vast the universe is, we're just receiving that signal now, but maybe there's something that we sent or they sent that's still on its way. You know what I mean? So I think as we develop as a civilization, that we will start getting answers to some of these questions.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think that if someone were, I don't know, a few million light years away, that they would be looking at us with a telescope, some super advanced telescope that allowed them to see right onto the surface of the Earth, and they would think we were dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I mean, there's every time you add a variable, it exponentially increases the amount of possibilities, and it would be impossible for us to cover every single possibility. I think one thing we've definitely all agreed upon, though, is that there is some form of life. Like we're not the only ones out there.
Mm-hmm. I think just to maybe summarize and bring this all together, like you said, I think we agree in the scientific community, and I think a majority of people can agree that there's some sort of life, or there potentially will be life out there. I think we can all agree. I think across the board, we agree that we're not going to know what it looks like. We could try to take guesses, but we can all agree that there's going to be some sort of evolutionary pattern. And once we discover what it is, we could probably figure out, how they evolved and gotten that way. Is there any final remarks before we close this journey that we had together?
I mean, I opened this by asking, I don't know what's scarier, us being all alone in this universe or there being other people out there. I was hoping you guys would both answer what you think.
I think if we're alone, I don't think that's scary at all. I just think that means we have a lot to conquer. We don't have all the time in the world, as our solar system will be coming to an end eventually as our sun starts to die out. If there's other life out there, personally, I think that would be exciting. Others who have watched, science fiction movies might think that's very terrifying. So it depends, I guess it depends, how you look at it, how you think about it. But those are kind of the two sides. Matt?
That's really interesting, Nick, because I kind of disagree with you.
Oh,
I think
really?
I know, like we never disagree, so it's kind of interesting. But I do think if we're the only civilization out there, or like planet Earth has the only type of life in this vast, almost infinite universe, I think that's terrifying. And one, because that our time here is limited, and there's going to be no other opportunities for other life to be spawned up that we know of. And also, we might be living a simulation, which we can talk about next time.
Definitely. That's a good way to segue into another podcast. So I just want to say, from all of us here at MVC, thank you so much for tuning in. And like always, make sure to leave questions, comments, and new podcast ideas in the comments below, as well as tweet at us at MVC Podcasts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Please stay safe and stay inside.
Yeah, thank you.